first of all, I didn't know that I would be talking about this, but it's relevant. A few years ago, an editor that I work with a lot in the United States asked me to write my autobiography. And I said to her, but I don't do anything. I'm just a professor. There's nothing. I'm not Jerzy Grotowski. I'm not Peter Brook. I have spent my whole life in the university, and I've had a very good time, but it's not very interesting. And she very cleverly then said, but you go to the theater more than anybody I know. Write your theatrical autobiography, your memories of the theater. Now, lest you think that she is exaggerating, let me tell you that in fact, for the last 30 or 40 years, well, I've been going to theater now for over 50 years. For the last 20, 30, 40 years, I have gone 6 nights or 7 nights a week. I go every night, wherever I am, whether I'm in Budapest or Shanghai or New York. And so I have seen thousands of plays, and I'm not tired yet. And so this really was an interesting challenge. What I decided to do, I'm coming to the point, there is a point to this. What I decided to do was to take a 50-year period, starting in 1960 and going to 2010, and writing a short essay, just 2,000 words, about a particular production that I saw that year. Not necessarily the best production or the most famous production, but a production that allows me to talk about a certain aspect of what the theater was like in New York or Berlin or whatever in that year. And I just finished last week writing the essay for 1978. And the production I'm writing about, or I'm still writing, I haven't quite finished it yet. The production I'm writing about is the first production that Squat Theater did in New York, Andy Warhol's Last Love, which I did see. And I used that then as a way of talking about that kind of theater and that kind of experimentation, and also for talking about Andy Warhol, and also talking about Ulrike Meinhof, who also is a major character in the play, but also in talking about many of these same things, because it was that was the first time I had really seen theater. The first scene took place in their actual living quarters upstairs, and I was actually in the living room like these apartment theaters. And then the second scene, as I'm sure you all know, was done in their storefront, which with a window open out to the street, so that we were inside the room, and the proscenium was sometimes used as a proscenium arch with action taking outside, and sometimes the action was inside, but people outside passing by could look in and see the action. So this allowed me to talk about a number of those things which I'd seen for the first time in that production. And you're right, it does anticipate a lot of things that go on in theater later on. So that's a big response to your first comment.
You are actually complicating things here, because I think we still have problems translating site-specific. We don't have an agreement how to translate that to Hungarian. We have at least 2 versions. And now you come with something totally different, which is still in a way similar to the previous one. So now we just wonder, one, how to translate it. I still don't know exactly. So we decided not to really translate that to Hungarian yet. And then, this is my real question. How would you, I mean, in your talk, of course you were talking about this phenomenon, which is also a kind of rhetorical phenomenon, what is called immersive by a lot of writers. But do you think, would you define immersive in a way that is your own, and would you think of it as a productive term in describing theater phenomena going on in the world today?
Well, let me first say that the term immersive is operating in a very traditional way, in not just in theater criticism, but in in almost all critical writing, and that is somebody utilizes a term and has a fairly particular idea about it, and then other people begin using it, and more meanings are generated until eventually it means almost nothing. And a good example would be, let's say, postmodernism. What on earth does that mean? Or post-structuralism. I mean, almost anything with post in front of it. Or even something along those same lines, deconstruction. That is, Derrida has a number of times explained it, and it gets more confusing each time he tries to explain it. And again, I can tell you what I mean by it, or whatever, and there are the reason for this spreading or diffusion of meaning. First of all, it's something very basic in language, and that is the more a word is used and the more speakers use it, the more its meaning spreads out. That's just the way language works. Nobody ever uses a word exactly the same way. So that happens whether you want it to or not. But secondly, there is an advantage. Now I'm speaking particularly about the world that uses terms like immersive and site-specific and so on. There is an advantage both for the researcher and the academic and for the producer to use these terms. Right now, let's start with the easier one, which is the producer. People say, how can you best describe the American theater quickly, so that somebody outside can say, how is it different from anybody else? And I say, it's all about money. That's all I have to say. But that means it affects everything. I mean, the theater, for starts, as Attila and I were talking about today, since none of the theaters, or there's no public supported theaters, every theater is constantly concerned with how is it going to even survive financially. But in the United States, and indeed everywhere in advanced capitalism, the selling of a product is enormously important. And an important part of the selling of the product is the branding of the product. And if you can, if the brand site-specific has gotten a little old and tired, immersive is something new and exciting, and you can sell that. So, and it's not, I mean, as I emphasized at the beginning of the paper, it is not at all surprising that as soon as a play with this new brand comes on the market and has a big success, then suddenly immersive theater becomes, but it spreads out in all kinds of directions because people want to use the brand even if it's not exactly the same thing. Now, that's on the commercial side, but on the, I suppose, somewhat more respectable academic side, there is also the matter of it's another, every time you have a new word, even if it's a sort of a slippery or ambiguous one, indeed maybe even better if it's somewhat ambiguous, it gives you another critical tool, another way to sort things out, another way to, it increases the vocabulary. And if you are in fact aware of and utilize the difference between these terms, they do allow you to distinguish between terms. Now, not everybody does that, but now we come to, but it does utilize the it allows you to be a little more precise. You could say this is not really site-specific; it's really immersive, and you can mean something by it. And I'll say what I mean by
where
it.
you see this shift.
Where I see it. But let me also say that academics do not escape selling their goods in a late capitalist society. And you're much more likely to get an article published in the United States right now if it's about immersive theater than about site-specific. That's old stuff. We're not as interested in that now. And publishers are not as interested. So it's not just the money-grubbing theaters. It affects the research world too. Okay, general observations, specific. Are there fairly specific meanings? Well, I can say what they are for me. The site-specific has been used to refer to a lot of different kinds of things. But the term grew up with the idea that in conventional theater, nothing was real. Everything you saw was an imitation of something else. If you decided, however, to create a play outside the theater, and you created it because it fitted a particular place, then it was site-specific. It was a production that could only be played in that particular place. A lot of early site-specific theater was very much influenced by the idea that, well, I mean, we can go back. This wasn't called site-specific. We would call it site-specific today, but we can even go back to the end of the 19th century, where people had been trying to get more and more and more realistic on the stage, and trying to build more and more realistic Midsummer Night's Dream forests and so on. And Max Reinhardt built huge forests on revolving turntables and so on. And somebody thought, why don't we actually go out and do it in a forest? And this was quite a revolutionary idea. And this would be what we would now call site-specific. It's specific to it's a production which is specific because it's specific to a forest. It's not, theaters are general, they're not specific, unless you have a play that's set in a theater. Pirandello would be site-specific because it's in the theater, it's on that stage. But site-specific really means the space, the production is created to be in that space. And if you're going to be very literal about it, you would say it couldn't be done anywhere else. If you do a site-specific theater that is in this site, then they must, I'm sure you have in Hungary, or used to have, sound and light spectacles, don't you? Or is that something that's only in Western Europe?
Like laser shows and stuff like that.
Yeah, where there's some famous building like the castle, and it was set outside in the cold weather, and lights play on it, and you have recordings and music about the history of it. Do you have shows like that?
No.
Locally, yes, in some like
locally, okay.
In some smaller towns.
Yeah, well, it was much more. This kind of thing was much more popular 20 or 30 years ago than now. But those are almost by definition are site specific. If you're going to do, they have a show like this at the pyramids in Egypt. Well, it's the pyramids. I mean, they are the real pyramids. It couldn't be them. Now, to me, that if you're going to be accurate, that's what site specific is. A kind of theater that is created for a particular location. Or I would say, I would also include theater that, let's say like Midsummer Night's Dream, is in a forest and you put it in a forest. It still is, I would still call that site specific. Some people, however, say anything that takes place outside a conventional theater is site specific. And I would say it's not site-specific unless it's important that it takes place there. If let's say you're doing a production of, well, say Midsummer Night's Dream, and you can move it around and do it anywhere. You can do it out in the garden here, you could go downtown and put it in a square, you could put it in a street, but you're doing the same thing. The actors are moving the same way. That I would not call site-specific. If it's created for a specific site, then I would call it site-specific. Now, how is that different from immersive? Well, that's an easy distinction, it seems to me. Immersive theater, the audiences must be immersed in the action. The action must be going on around them. Now, you could have site-specific theater that was also immersive, but most of it is not. Usually in site-specific theater, let's say I was doing As You Like It out here in the garden, and we set up bleachers at this end, and we were all watching it. You could say it's a site-specific theater, but it's not immersive unless the audience gets down and moves around among the actors. And that to me, now, as I say, some people have said, oh, it's immersive if we're all in the same room. I don't like the hotel presentations where there's one actor, or like the first scene in the Squat Theater, Andy Warhol. We all sat, there are only about 15 of us, it's just a little room. We all sat on benches along one wall, and the acting took place along the other wall, which was one of their bedrooms. And over at one end of the room was a window out onto a fire escape that the visitor from outer space came in from. And on the other side was the door we all came in from, that went out into the hallway and downstairs. Now, that's certainly a site-specific. I wouldn't call it immersive. Some people would because it's so intimate. We're all in the same room. It's not as though in the theater we're separated by a proscenium. We're in the auditorium, they're on the stage. So some people on those grounds would call it immersive. I go back to the actual word immersive. Immersive means that you're sunk into something. You're immersed in water. The water's all around you. You're not sitting outside looking at the water, even if you and the water are in the same space. So that's the distinction I would make. The British have a third term, which is the promenade theater. We don't use that much in the United States sometimes. And what the promenade production is, it's sort of halfway between site-specific and immersive. And that is, you gather at a place and something takes place, there's an action or a scene or something, and then you're given directions, or more often one of the actors will say, we'll blow a whistle and do this, and then you will all go following that actor off into some other room, or in a different part of the city maybe, and so you have, it's a promenade. I mean, which literally means you're walking along from one place to another. And usually promenade productions are not really immersive, even though you're engaged in them. Usually you go to let's say, if this were a promenade production, I would say, okay, now we're all going to, follow me, we're all going to go out in the garden, the next scene will be out there. And that would be a promenade production. But usually, each time the audience stops, they just sort of, if they're often not chairs, they just sort of stand around a little group and watch, but they don't mix in with the actors. So I wouldn't call it immersive, even though they're obviously very physically engaged in this. And then there are obvious infinite variations of all of these things. I think one that I would mention, just because I find it so fascinating, is that especially in London, they've now developed a kind of promenade production where where you will be given instructions to go to a particular place, and you go there, maybe you have to take the tram or something, and you go to this space, and then it says, all right, look across the street, that's the first act. And sometimes you can't tell whether they have actually staged something or whether it's just what's happening. So, and nobody has actually given this type of thing a name yet, but it seems to me a different kind of thing. And so, and I could talk about that, but I won't.
What about the spectator? I mean, what about the agency of the spectator? Is that needed, or even, you know, the illusion, as you talked about, the illusion of the agency, or can we really have that point in a performance when spectators are not just kind of given the illusion of being agents in the performance, but they're really in some way influencing the events?
Well,
or
there's a whole spectrum.
Yeah, that's the other extreme.
Well, yeah. Well. First of all, what we really learned when reception theory came in the 70s and 80s was that the spectator has agency. That that what's presented on the stage is not simply accepted by a totally passive figure. That the actual theater experience is a co-creation of how we process what we're seeing on the stage. That really was at the heart of reception theory. And so, in that sense, there's always agency. I mean, you're always creating
how you construct
how you construct okay. So as long as you have theater, you have that. So, but then we begin to move away from that. That is I really don't think that changes when you, for example, bring the audience members up on the stage. Well, like immersive theater, like Evil von Hove, when the audience is up wandering around on the stage, but the actors are paying no attention to them. They're just doing what they do. Same way with Punch Drunk. The actors move around. If an audience member gets in their way, they walk around it, but they don't interact. I don't think the agency changes then. I think it's the same as it always has been. The question then becomes, what happens if the audience member is actually given permission to enter into the action, to speak to the actors, and to have the actors respond to them. Now, Cigna does this, not always, but in the Ruby Town Oracle, there was no text. The actors, the 40 inhabitants of the town, knew the history of the town, and you could talk to them about it. And they were playing characters that they knew, and you could talk to them about that. But they had no lines, and you could ask them about their past and their history. They were playing a role, but you could improvise into it. You could say, well, would you like to come and have a drink with me? And fine, they would do that. I mean, that you could enter into the life of the village. It was as though, as a tourist, I would come into a town I didn't know and started meeting people and talking to them and getting acquainted with them. And so there's a great deal of agency, except you remain kind of a tourist. You still don't know what the rules really are, but there's no script. Well, I think for the sake of completeness, forgive me my candor here, there was even a brothel in the town, which you could participate in. Now this goes pretty far in terms of agency, but now let me. So I think this is about as far. Now I can imagine a production, and I'm sure people have done them, though I've never seen one, where you simply go to a particular place with a group of actors, or maybe even with just other audience members, and they say, okay, do something. I'm sure this has been done. I mean, then you really would be almost like in a life situation, like you were somewhere with a crowd that you had to interact with them. But as far as the theater is concerned, I think the kind of thing that Cigna has done is about as far as you go. I must tell you a story about this. There was a I go to every immersive theater I can in New York. I'm fascinated by it. And they're probably the second, well, there are three very popular immersive theater productions. Sleep No More, and Then She Fell, which is based on Alice in Wonderland. Quite a wonderful subject for immersive theater, actually. And the other is called Speakeasy Dollhouse. And in Speakeasy Dollhouse, you attend a recreation of a 1930s underground bar in New York when liquor was illegal and you had to go to secret places to drink. And this is one such place. And there's several different rooms that are part of the bar, and there's also a couple rooms that are the apartment of the guy who runs the bar. And when you come into Speakeasy Dollhouse, and again, there's probably about the same number as Punch Drunk, maybe 15, 20 actors, probably more than that, 30. And these are people in the bar, and the girls that sing and entertain there, and other guests, not just spectators, but other actors who are in the play. In order to kind of get you into this world, when you arrive at the door, you're given a note which has instructions that you must follow. I guess you don't have to, but you're supposed to. And the instruction I got was, find Jack. And, well, no, it was first find the dollhouse. In the bedroom of this place, there was really quite elaborate little dollhouse. Find the dollhouse, see what's going on in the bathroom of the dollhouse, find Jack and tell him about it. Okay, so
how did it go?
So I found the dollhouse, and in the bathroom, the door was just ajar, but blood was coming out on the floor, and a man's legs and shoes were sticking out. Obviously, he'd been shot or stabbed or something. Well, pretty ghastly sight, so obviously Jack would be interested in this. So I went to the bar and I said, is Jack in this evening? And the bartender said, oh, you don't want to talk to Jack. I said, I have instructions. I'm ready. Well, he said, it's your problem. Jack is not an easy person to talk to. but there's a gambling room downstairs, and he's often there playing cards. So I went downstairs, and there were some guys playing cards. I said, hey, you happen to be Jack? No. He hasn't come in yet this evening, but come sit down and play cards. So I was playing cards with him. And some of these were actors, most of them were actors. There was one other audience member. And a little while, one of them said, you see these three guys who just came in? The small one is Jack. The other two are his bodyguards. But it's not a good idea to talk to Jack. I have my instructions. So I went over to him and I said, are you Jack? He said, who wants to know? I don't want to cause any trouble, but I was given instructions. Who are you? He said. I said, you don't know me. I have instructions. There's something I need to tell you about. Okay, what do you need to tell me about? I said, I saw upstairs in the dollhouse somebody had been killed in the bathroom, and I don't know. I'm supposed to tell you about this. He says, is this a threat or something? And I said, I don't know what it is. I was just told to tell you this. He said, all right, get lost. And then the evening went on. And other things happened, and I talked to some of the bar girls, and very much in character. They were asking me, what I thought of the political situation. Did I support Herbert Hoover? But a bit of a play was going on around us, but not a very detailed one that involved some family arguments and so on. But then, at a key moment later on, shots were fired. And everybody rushed upstairs, and Jack had been shot in the bathroom. And they dragged him out, bleeding, and put him in a big chair out in the middle of where the chorus girls performed and stuff. And I leaned over him and I said, "I told you so." Just to see what he would say. Well, he didn't say anything. He just pretended like I didn't exist, which is all he could do. I mean, what could he do? But I found this, and then later on he died. I helped carry his coffin out. I found this is why I keep going. I'm fascinated with just how do the rules work? How far can you go? What can you? And here the rules were very clear that up until that I could do anything I wanted to, but I couldn't interfere with the plot. And I couldn't interfere with the reality of the plot. That is, he had, within that world, he had been really shot. So I couldn't do anything about that.
So you had instructions, so you had limited agency, which is
agency.
something that happens. Godot gives you some instructions, and you have to,
yes,
follow that.
Even
the illusion of agency,
right,
well, that might be an illusion in real life too.
Well,
in some way.
That's true too. That's true too.
But if you think that it's very easy to find these great performances in New York, you're wrong. Actually, no matter how big the New York theater scene is, it's often very, very hard to find the interesting shows. And if you think you can just go on a website and find what you're interested in, you're again wrong. You need someone to tell you where to go. So a lot of things, a lot of news about theater travel orally, actually.
It's true.
And people and fabulous professors like Marvin send out tip sheets to students from time to time, suggesting students what to see, what to watch, where to go.
Every 2 weeks I put out a tip sheet that has 20 or 30. Here's some interesting, and by definition, I don't do big Broadway shows. These are all peculiar things like this that you would not possibly otherwise know.
So I have another question, but this is the last one, I promise. So you all know that an anthology of Marvin's writings was published, a színpadtól, a színpadig, with the title, edited by Mária Kurdi and Zsuzsa Csikai from Pécs, and it's been translated by 12 different people, which will give you an insight into Marvin Carlson's works, although not, like full books have not, unfortunately, been translated to Hungarian yet, but this might come. And a review of this anthology, written by Veronika Darida, who is here among us, has the following passage, and I wanted to confront you with this, see what your opinion is about this. So that's what she writes. Though closely following the contemporary theories and tendencies, he still preserved the traditional position of the theater historian. And what do you think about this? Do you see yourself as a theater historian mainly? And how do you see the relationship between theory and history of theater?
Well, I think everything I've said today shows you, I think, that I remain a historian. I can't say I started as a historian. I started as a scenic designer, but I became a historian soon. And that's primarily what I've been. Even when I became a theorist, I very much was embedded in history. I don't know what to say except I plead guilty. It does seem that it's much. You could much better understand even the most radical and peculiar theatrical manifestations if you know something about where the theater came from or what's developed in the past. It gives you a better perspective on it. I mean, just as I say, talking about immersive theater, I go back and think about about people moving out of the theaters and into forests in the 19th century. I mean, nothing really in the theater is new. And seeing how different people have wrestled with particular problems in different historical circumstances gives you perspectives on what is new or what has changed or how the configuration is different. It gives you a better perspective. I only wish I knew more theater history than I did, but that is very important to me.
So it's a good warning for us theory-minded people to start digging more into history.
Well, the first major history book that I wrote was the first major theory book that I wrote was a history of theory.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Thank you so much. Now it's your turn to ask questions to Marvin. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you very much for your wonderful lecture. I have a question. What do you think about the relation between immersive theater and performing arts and happenings? I would like to a little bit broader the picture, because what I have in mind is Marina Abramovich's famous performances, Written Zero. With an empty room, Marina Abramović is standing in one corner, and there were two tables at the other side of the room with various objects, pleasant ones and dangerous ones. And the audience or the participants were quite free to do whatever they would have liked to do. So what do you think about that?
Well, yeah, there are a lot of body art pieces and the Yoko Ono's cut piece, you may know too, where people could come in and cut pieces off of her clothing or whatever they felt like doing. Back in the 70s and early 80s, there was a lot of that kind of allowing agency or freedom. It's a complicated question. Performance art is another one of these things that means hundreds of different things, and worse yet, just performance. Especially since we got a whole field now of performance studies, and performance means something very different, or even performance studies, to Richard Schechner than it does to Jill Dolan or somebody else. But to try to go specifically to your question, let me say that when early performance work was started out in California and then moved very quickly to New York, it was not a theatrical form. In fact, Caprow specifically said, this has nothing to do with theater. This is an art form. It takes place in galleries, not in theater. And since then, these things have become much more blurred. But at the very beginning, most people who were doing this kind of and again, it's called various things, body art or whatever, saw themselves not as theater people, but as performance people, and therefore they were not. I guess the critical difference is that there is not mimesis. They weren't pretending to do anything. They were doing something, and they were asking the audiences to, in some cases, participate in that doing or witness that doing. So they and the audience, in a way, had equal agency, because it wasn't a question of I'm making up some kind of fiction that I want you to participate in. This is really my body. I want you to react to that real body. I don't. I mean, I don't know how to connect that more with immersive theater, because it really comes off another base entirely. And theater is really denied by those participants. I don't know, does that, I feel I'm kind of talking around the question. Do you, does that begin to approach what you're concerned about, or does it not?
Yes. Somehow, yeah. Yes, but it seems to me that theatre people has just discovered that the audience can be moved, the audience can be immersed.
Just a remark, and Wolf Vostell also had some similar happenings during the...
What's that?
Wolf Vostell.
Oh yes, right. Well, of course, again, if I may speak historically, theater does usually discover something that art knew, the art world or the music world knew 15 or 20, 30 years before.
That's what I would like to make.
Yeah, oh, I think you're absolutely right. That is to say, things like the happenings, for example, are very much like certain kinds of immersive, so-called immersive theater or participatory theater. It's now being recodified in theatrical terms, but indeed I would say that if you go back, you see how I'm doing this, if you go back to the 1920s and look at the, or even a little later, the early work of the Black Mountain people, John Cage and Alan Caprow and all that group, none of them were theater people, but everything they did has later been rediscovered and claimed by theater as a new innovation, a new discovery. I mean, just the mention of Cage, the whole idea of chance. It took theater 20 years after Cage to discover that chance is something you could use. So yeah, I think that's in fact many of these terms that we use. I mean, site-specific started in the art world. It was not a theater term at all. There's 10 or 15 years of site-specific, well, and environmental art. Environmental art is way before environmental theater. Almost nobody in theater admits that. Certainly not the people who claim they invented it, like, well,
yeah.
But yeah, it's a very good point, though.
One more question.
Thanks for this talk, and I was telling you that I'm teaching your theater semiotics, and I am indebted to you because it's a very popular course among students.
Well,
so
good.
You made it acceptable for that generation. I'm teaching at the University of Szeged. Out of curiosity, what shows in Budapest are in your agenda book for this visit?
I don't even know
going to see any?
I don't know. What am I scheduled for? I sent you a list of places. You haven't told me what I'm...
No, but you don't have anything else scheduled, unfortunately.
I sent you a list for it. All right, we'll talk about this afterward. I think tonight I would like to go see Electra there, if it's on. I sent you a list of 3 plays that were on tonight, but we'll talk about that. Anyway, well, I've left this to Attila with what results you could see. But last night we went to see a really not very interesting production at the National Theatre. I must say 2 important things about it. One was I was fascinated by the theater. I think it's a terrible theater, but I was fascinated by it. It's almost a postmodern joke, but seeing the theater was a wonderful experience. And secondly, I had never read John the Valiant, and Attila gave me a copy yesterday, and I read it. I loved it. So I'm now. Those are the 2 positive things. I was not really overwhelmed by the the
Gave you a
last.
lot of time to think.
What's that?
Gave you a lot of time to think during the performance.
Well, the last time I was in Budapest, however, I was only here 2 nights. I saw 2 productions. Both of them were very good. I saw Othello at the National Opera, and I saw a very, very strange choice, but a brilliant production. Ben Jonson's Bartholomew Fair. I don't even know if a lot of you even know this play. It's by a contemporary of Shakespeare. The British don't do it very often. It's a very challenging and difficult play. And this was a brilliant production that we saw at the National Theater, my wife and I. And I often told the story of seeing that production because we loved it so much. And as we were leaving the theater, of course it was in Hungarian, which we didn't understand. As we were leaving the theater, my wife turned to me and said, "You know, it's the first time I've understood this play." And I often tell this story because it says something very important about theater. When I'm traveling, I try to go to the theater as much as I can, whether I know the language or not, although I cheat to the extent that I try to go to see Shakespeare, Brecht, Ibsen, and then it's fine. Even the most bizarre productions, I can figure out where I am. So, now, I have to tell you one other story about the National Theater, since you bring that up.
Yeah.
Before I came to New York about 20 years ago, I taught for a while at the University of Indiana, and I told Attila a little about this story. And strangely enough, there was a group of amateur Hungarian actors on the campus of the University of Indiana. Not the place you would think there would be a lot of Hungarians, but there were, well enough to form a theater company. And they did, I saw a number of the things that they did, and they were pretty good. They were not, 1 or 2 of them were theater people, but they were from agriculture and English and all manner of things. And they called themselves the not yet ready for the vezeti színház players. and this has become a joke in my family, that my wife or I will say, well, it was pretty good, but it was not yet ready for the vezeti színház. Now, this last year, when, to my really great pleasure and honor, this collection of a number of my essays was translated into Hungarian. I sent my wife the cover for this, and her response was, "Well, at last you're ready for the vezeti színház." So obviously I had to go to the theater.
Oh, yeah.
Marvin, thank you very much. I'm afraid I have to cut the discussions here because we have to reconsider your evening plans. And thank you all for coming. Thank you, Marvin, for cutting a few days out of your tight schedule to come here visit us in Budapest. I'm sure you can still ask some questions to Marvin quickly in private before we grab him out of here. Thank you again for coming, and have a great evening. Köszönjük, hogy itt voltak. Thank you.